Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be checking out some of the more interesting fights of my Labyrinth of Legends run with Apocalypse, and I will showcase either in their entirety or sometimes they're going to be fast forwarded fights against Magik as Spider-Man, which was a bit dodgy, X23, and then obviously as well Maestro solo as well. So before we get to the kind of actual fight commentary, I want to explain my setup. I was running Suicide Masteries, and as for my team I was using White Magneto, Professor X, and then I believe it was Archangel and Emma Frost, I think. I'm not 100% sure of that one anymore, but the point was I was effectively trying to trigger Professor X power gain synergy, which built power over time depending on how many charge he has, as well as the synergy that increased the poison resistance, and that is kind of like the key one. The poison resistance synergy here is very important because it effectively turns any mutant into like a mini Deadpool with willpower and Suicide Masteries. So Apocalypse was always able to keep his health topped up, and after the initial ramp up process where I did have to use a couple of revives, and that is only because I have only a 4-star 330 Professor X, so obviously I needed to find a way how to get some charges on him. So what I did is I knocked down the opponents with either Apocalypse or one of my synergy members, and I left them at 1%, brought in my 4-star 330 Professor X, finished the fights with him and got him up to 4 Cerebro charges, and obviously then I pumped up Apocalypse to 4 charges. I actually didn't use the synergy that lets him start the quest with 4 charges. I naturally kind of like got them, and then you are all set. So after that point I didn't use a single item for the remainder of the run, and yeah, if I had like a maxed out Professor X, I assume I could be able to actually get it done probably without any items at all. But once you have Professor X ramped, Apocalypse is close to indestructible because you have the weakness debuff on opponents, so opponents hit weaker, plus you regen all the time, and you just have very good control over the fight. We saw that he took Magik down like it was absolutely nothing. Obviously the 70% concussion there helped me a lot as well because she hardly procced Limbo. Now this fight was a bit dodgy and definitely a very scary start because he started evading like crazies and stunned me, and I didn't quite understand why those evades were still going through. I knew that this Apocalypse ability doesn't really stop Labyrinth evade, but he was still evading a really suspicious amount. But once I kind of like refocused myself and started playing much more carefully, I am able to gain control of this fight as well. But yeah, the start was quite dodgy, but after that initial onslaught that I had to endure, I got the fight in control. Main thing is kind of like drop that level 1, drop that level 2 afterwards to get that concussion active. That concussion will also significantly help my chances for him not to trigger evade, I suppose. But yeah, there are definitely some very weird interactions happening at play, but Apocalypse definitely can do it, and we can see that healing ability that he has with Professor X is really coming in handy at this point. I am regenerating quite significant amount of health. For a couple of times I'm gonna go up to my level 3 just in order to avoid that recall damage, to get to some higher amount of health that I feel kind of more comfortable with. In a typical fight you are easily able to offset the recall damage. In addition, you are also able to heal up, but just skipping to level 3s for a while helped me increase the speed I was regenerating health. Obviously it's nothing like absolutely insane crazy like a Deadpool, actual Deadpool heal, but it's still very noticeable, and it's still extremely helpful. As I said, I didn't have to use any revives, any potions past the point I had kind of like amped up my setup in its entirety. Additionally, the Professor X's 4 charge with that increased power gain synergy is really helpful, even though it initially doesn't look like it's giving me too much power. But just the simple fact that it's working in the background consistently and constantly, even during the time opponents are throwing their special attacks, even during the time I am throwing my special attacks, just overall enabled me to spam my special attacks much more frequently than I would be able to do otherwise. And obviously Apocalypse's damage is pretty much completely tied to his ability to launch special attacks, because his basic attacks are not really all that powerful at all. Again, I do want to make a standard disclaimer, because this is Apocalypse pretty much as roided up as you can get him to be. It is with Suicide Masteries, it is with fully ramped up Professor X, it is with White Magneto, and a bunch of other synergies. So this is not really kind of like a realistic setup for most of the scenarios, but here he definitely is getting a lot of extra attack, and it shows. It wasn't a long run. I think the entire stream took me just about 2 hours. Most of the fights were like 200 something hit for 1.5 million opponents, and I think the Maestro solo is going to take just under 500 hits, but obviously that's Maestro and he's tankier. But it's also worth noting that mutants do have very preferable ability set against Maestro, I guess. And here we can see I'm going to slow down towards the very end of the fight. Another insanely useful thing obviously about Apocalypse is that damage over time is letting you also kind of relax and not to feel pressed and stressed about striking opponents frequently, because for every half second they are ticking for 1100 something from a maxed out 5-star if you're running Suicide Masteries, and that is a 2000 damage per second they are taking no matter what is happening in the fight. And it certainly makes the fights feel a lot more pleasant, because quite often some of the most frustrating things in this game period is trying to bait out opponents' special attacks when you get annoyed and all that stuff. But with Apocalypse you have a much more easygoing attitude toward the tempo of the fight once you have set yourself up completely, mainly because you just see the opponent taking all that damage no matter what they do. And next we're just gonna quickly rinse through the X23 fight. So against X23, obviously here Despair works quite significantly, because you do get 4 debuffs as a default on opponent, and if you have maxed out Despair, that alone reduces the opponent's regeneration by close to 60%, I believe. Then one of those 4 debuffs is Poison, which additionally reduces opponent's heal by 30%. So you should be reducing opponent's heal by about 90% or so. Any additional debuff that you are able to place on opponents will pretty much completely shut down the heal 100%. So if you drop a heavy attack and you have those 2 bleeds active, they cannot heal at all. If you're just running on those 4 debuffs, they will have some ability to heal. However, it is also worth noting that you do have a 70% concussion on the opponent, therefore more often than not they will not even trigger their healing abilities, and also the Labyrinth extra additional heal that this X23 has more often than not will not even trigger. So we can see that we do see some regen from now and then, but it's really not regenerating a lot thanks to Despair, and we don't see many of them no matter how actively we strike the opponent. So yeah, Apocalypse can handle this fight extremely well as well. Actually, now to come to think of it, I think there could be only one fight which Apocalypse cannot do well, but I'm somewhat thinking that you can even do that Abomination fight as well. Aside from that, I think Apocalypse can pretty much take every fight in Labyrinth, which was kind of like a unique trait previously only befitting to Aegon, I believe, because I think Aegon can realistically well enough to take every single fight in Labyrinth, and that was one of the kind of like slogan lines about him, which I frequently refer to, because I believe that he's pretty much the only champion in the game that can take every fight in Labyrinth. And now I do think that Apocalypse, slow playing with that reduced poison damage by 72% and all that other stuff, I do think that he could potentially be able to take down Abomination. That certainly would be quite interesting to see if I do try it eventually. But other than Abomination, I don't think there is any other fight that he cannot do or he would struggle with, because typically the harder fights would say, let's be Juggernaut, right? But he should be having a quite good matchup against Juggernaut because of concussion. He wouldn't trigger those unstoppables all that often. In addition to that, you have all of this damage over time, therefore the slower pace of the fight wouldn't significantly matter in there. We have already seen, I think, on Legacy's channel, Apocalypse solo Agent Venom, which is one of the tougher fights. I soloed X23 and I soloed Spider-Man on my run, and I think that pretty much covers for the harder fights of Labyrinth. Doctor Strange might be a really big pain in the ass, though. That is definitely worth testing out, but outside of that, yeah, I don't think there are too many fights he would struggle with, especially since his debuffs cannot be shrugged off, and he should be able to take on that Venom Pool and Kamala Khan if the normal laws of physics exist in Labyrinth, which they often don't. But still. So yeah, it would be interesting to see somebody attempt a 100% exploration with Apocalypse, the primary champ. But now to Maestro fight. So mutants basically do not really get punished when fighting against Maestro, so here I have sped up the fight quite significantly. I believe it's times 4 speed because it is quite long. I will slow it down later on towards the end, but the main point is, again, you do your setup. Only disadvantage in the fight mutant champions have against Maestro is that when you hit Maestro's block, you get power drained, but it's really not all that significant of a penalties, and it isn't dependent on RNG like, let's say, tech champions are, where you just have to hope that he's not going to regen. Basically, he has no ability to regen against mutant champions, so that will obviously let Apocalypse have extremely consistent and stable results against Maestro. And you have all your debuffs on him. He's ticking. Obviously, he is a 3.3 million opponent, so the fight does take a longer time. Here we can see that the first enrage timer is about set to expire. We're entering the second enrage, but overall it is quite a good fight for Apocalypse. And yeah, I did manage to solo him. This was my first and only try for the fight, and I must say that he did really well in Labyrinth. So he certainly is a good Labyrinth option if you are able to set him up correctly and if you have all the required champions, mainly Professor X, because I think he's definitely absolutely mandatory in order to interact with those suicides, in order to give you that healing from the poison debuff that you have on you throughout the entire time. And that made him so sustainable, so reliable. Any mess ups didn't matter too much, and you could just kind of focus on the fighting, or don't get too annoyed by getting hit in the face by that random enrage, because everything just seemed to be relatively inconsequential. But here we can see that the fight is nearly over. I will try to time it out with a level 3. So that is also going to be pretty much it for today's video. I do hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you did like today's video, you're obviously more than welcome to check out the full stream. I will leave a link to that in video description. But that will do for now. The fight's over, so yeah, hit that like button, hit that sub button, drop in the comment section, tell me what do you think about the video, and I'll catch you guys soon. See ya.